Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Hi, I'm Terry Woolman, and this show is about creating a successful life and what that means to my guest today, country artist Rockie Lynne. I'd like to share my intention that inspires this podcast. Time passes quickly, and I've learned that we should do what's in our hearts and do it well without apologies or excuses. I encourage you to create your life and your art in your own unique way and express your artistry with joy and with abandon. Be willing to work uncompromisingly for what you believe in. Success will have a better chance of finding you when you live your life with integrity, focus, and passion. Be selfish with your discipline and selfless in your performance, and don't forget to have fun along the way. Let me tell you about my guest today. From his humble beginnings of being left at the door of Barium Springs Home for Children to touring the world, selling hundreds of thousands of records and writing songs recorded by superstars, you can say Rockie Lynne's life story is the stuff of American folklore. Yet, many people don't know the name Rockie Lynne. Well, that is about to change when this country artist, philanthropist, veteran, and North Carolina native finally shares his story through the film Where I Belong, out April 26th on PBS and Amazon. Where I Belong definitely merges a musician's quest for authentic self-expression with a touching search for familial lineage. This poignant documentary will be released in tandem with Rockie's new album, Love, a rockin' collection of prime modern country. Rockie's self-titled debut album landed 3 singles on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart. He has performed on Good Morning America, Fox News, CMT, GAC, and more than a dozen appearances on the Grand Ole Opry. In 2004, Rockie, a veteran of the 82nd Airborne Division, co-founded the Tribute to the Troops motorcycle ride to raise funds and awareness for America's fallen soldiers and their families. Rockie Lynne, welcome to Making It.
Oh, thank you, Terry. Thank you for having me, and thank you for all those kind words. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for your service, Rockie. I appreciate that.
Oh, it was my honor.
I want to start with, there's so much to talk about and unpack with you. And let me just start with this. It's a quote of yours, and it's love and forgiveness is the way to get through life. It helps ensure your past won't affect your future.
Wow.
Tell me more about that.
Well, Terry, we could have made a completely different movie. We could have made a movie about the ugly side of being found in a garbage dumpster and growing up in an orphanage and foster homes and those kind of situations that happened to kids a long time ago. But that wasn't what we wanted to talk about at all. We left all of that stuff out because forgiveness is how you move on from those things. You gotta, if you're looking back, you're surely not looking forward. And I think that what we tried to do was make a movie about hope and perseverance and how, regardless of what age you are, you can be creating new music or making new paintings, or if you're a plumber, doing new plumbing, whatever it is you want to do. And that was what our movie was about. And what we were trying to do is to be that quote you're saying is that I try not to let things that happen that are negative in my life at all. And if they are, I just let them go right through the train station and not give it any of my serenity, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And I really connect with those words. That's why I wanted to start our conversation with those, because it touched me when I read that or heard it in your new movie. So is that something you had as a child, like sort of just, were you born with that, or did somebody teach that to you? The idea of forgiveness and love?
Well, I think maybe I've always kind of been a forgiving, kind person at my heart, but I also think that you had to let things go if you were in a foster home and and people were doing things to you that they shouldn't. You have to let it go or it'll just tear you apart. So you have to kind of move on.
You mentioned perseverance also, and you said if you have a dream like I did, to have to keep after it and find a way to make it happen. is really the way you've gone through life. I'm a big believer in perseverance and tenacity. I know you have buckets full of that.
Well, thank you, Terry.
Yeah.
I do. I think, I had an attorney once said to me, "You're just too stupid to quit, aren't you?" And in retrospect, he's probably right, but I also think that as long as you feel like you have something to contribute, and if you're trying as hard as you can, you'll find your tribe. There's people out there that'll like anything that you personally like. Richard Lee told me one time, this really great songwriter friend of mine, that the first time he went to tour Japan, he was afraid nobody would get his music because he didn't speak Japanese. But
Right.
then, and he got there and he said, the more personal my songs were, the more they related to him, because I guess we're all going through the same thing. We're all in the same boat, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You're also really devoted to your family. You're a husband, you're a father, you're a brother, you're a son, um, and and have essentially discovered through this film. We'll get into it in a minute, but two sets of parents, who
Oh,
are very important to you and very dear to you in very different yet similar ways.
that's something that I didn't see coming
Yeah,
with this movie, because I had my adoptive parents who my adoptive dad is still alive. He's 91 years old, and I live in North Carolina so that I can care for him.
right,
And what a blessing that is. I mean, he gave me a home. I was almost 5 years old, so he gave me a home when I didn't have one,
right,
and food and a shelter over my head. And now, all these decades later, I'm able to return that love to him by caring for him as he gets to the end of his journey on
right.
this earth.
Yeah,
And it's the most beautiful thing I think I've ever done, is being able to be here and give him, uh, some of the love that he was kind enough to give to me.
right. It in some ways, there's nothing more special than that. I did not have that opportunity with my dad because he died when I was a teenager in an accident. So it was sudden. There was no uh, opportunity there. But with my mom, as she grew to an older age, I got to be more involved in hands-on with the end of her life, the last couple of years and through the final steps. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity.
Oh,
And so I can understand why it's so important to you and so exquisite.
I agree with you, Terry. I mean,
Yeah.
my dad, he's a tough old guy. He's a Korean War veteran, and he
Mhm.
was he was a disciplinarian on me. He wanted me to
Yeah.
have a good life and work hard, and it's been something interesting to see the strongest, toughest man I've ever known get to the point that he needs my help,
Right.
you know and
Mhm.
then it's such a blessing to me to be able to help him through that, and to help him get to his VA appointments, or up the stairs, or in a chair, or whatever it is to help him do. I feel fortunate to be able to do it.
And also for him to have the opportunity to share in your family that you've created as
Oh
well.
yeah, they
To
just
watch
love him.
that. Yeah. To watch your success, to watch that a film was just made about your life, which was magnificent and unexpected. I know for you, that's the last thing I would imagine was on your list, to be the subject of
Absolutely.
a
I,
documentary.
I thought, what a crazy idea. Nobody would want to see that. And then they just kept going, and they found out all these wonderful things. And
Yeah.
it ended up being, we just did a screening down in Florida at the Villages, at a movie theater there. And
Mhm.
and people just said the nicest things, because I think the overall theme of the movie is that it gives people hope.
Mhm.
It's not really about a guy that plays guitar and tries to learn how to play guitar and sing. It's really about a dream, trying to uh, get off, regardless of what your dream is, whether you want to be a carpenter, or a musician, or a plumber, or anything like that. If you keep going and keep looking for your tribe, you will eventually find them.
So let's talk about your early years, and then we'll get into your development as an artist and as a veteran and everything that's going on in your life. You grew up in Statesville, North Carolina. and you were adopted at 5 years old, which is kind of old, you know.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, I know there are kids who don't get adopted out. But at 5 years old, you were already, you were a human, had a point of view, you had um, heartache and disappointment and good things in your life as well. Um, but you were adopted by a Southern Baptist family with limited means, and is your parents' names Ethel and Fred? Is that right?
They were Fred and Ethel. How crazy is that? I don't know the people that are old enough to remember
Right.
the honeymooners, but my dad and mom were Fred and Ethel, and
Yeah.
they were hardworking, very blue collar. You know, my dad and mom both grew up during the Depression.
Hmm.
My dad had a sixth grade education, and my mother had a only finished the third grade. They weren't not intelligent people. They were very intelligent people. They just had to work, and they had 10 or 12 brothers and sisters each, and that's how it was back in the Depression days in North Carolina. So I think that might have been why it was difficult for them to adopt when they learned that they couldn't have children. It was very hard for them to go through the process, probably the paperwork, and then their financial abilities as well. And then, I was an older kid, and usually the babies go, but I think it being a
Right.
little bit older kid is a blessing because I know what it was like. I don't have very super vivid memories of all the things at the orphanage, but I remember it,
Right.
and I remember what it was like. And then I also remember what a different feeling it was to have a home, or to have my mom who cared whether I had something to eat, or
Hmm.
whether my clothes were clean, or or any care at all, and to go from that, I think it's better in some ways because I was more able to be aware of it and appreciative of it. And then as I get older, it makes me even more grateful for the people, my mom and dad, that came into my life and helped me, because a lot of kids did never made it out of there.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So did they encourage you? You started playing guitar. Was that your first instrument, guitar?
Yep, I got a guitar when I was in the seventh grade, but I'd been in love with it since I was probably 4 or 5 years old. There was a fellow that came to the orphanage and played for us,
Hmm.
and he sang, "I'm going to Alabama," with a banjo on my knee. And man, I to this day, that sound coming out of that guitar, I thought, I just knew I was going to try to learn how to play that guitar for the rest of my life. And sitting here with you today, Terry, that's still my goal, to learn how to play. But I didn't get one until I was in the seventh grade, because I
Right.
had to mow yards and find a way to get it myself.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot more meaningful when you have to work for it like that.
I still have it.
That guitar?
I still have that. I bought it from J.C. Penney,
Hmm.
and it was $99. It was a
Wow.
Stratocaster copy. Hey, hold on, I'll grab it. Hold on, it's right here. I'll
Hmm.
just get it.
This is awesome. I can't wait to see it. And
So if you ordered it from the J.C. Penney catalog, this is what came. And
wow.
it's a Stratocaster copy, and it's made in that big fancy factory in Japan, the Makasudi or whatever it was called.
Hmm.
And see, it says global here. I don't, not Strat, but it's
Yeah,
been sitting in the hall forever, and I bet you still in tune.
that's
I mean,
great.
and I paid $99 for the dang thing.
Wow.
How cool!
And you still have it.
I,
That's awesome.
I will keep it forever, man.
Absolutely. So
I did
go ahead, Rocky.
I didn't change the pickups or anything. It's still exactly like it was. I
That's
know you would care because you're a guitar
I
player,
do. I'm totally geeking out on that. Absolutely. Uh, so before you headed off to Los Angeles to study at the Musicians Institute, uh, apparently with dreams of becoming the next Eddie Van Halen, because you have a rock background as well. Uh, did you were you all self-taught? Did your friends teach you? Did your parents were they able to get you a couple lessons, or did none of that happen?
My mom and dad weren't really supportive of me being a musician,
Sure.
because mostly because they couldn't see it. They're blue collar folks, and they wanted me to work and work hard. So they really tried to instill, and did instill, a really good work ethic in me. But I think it's hard to dream if you think about it. My dad, he quit school in the sixth grade, and he lost two fingers on his hand at a sawmill working I think it's hard for him to see above that a lot
Hmm.
of times. And it was in my DNA. It was in my calling that I wanted to do this. I really can't do anything else. This is exactly what I do. And I'll go down singing, but so I was self-taught until I went into the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was at Fort Bragg, I took music classes. When we weren't deployed in the Army, I took college level music classes. And this is interesting. You'll be interested in this, Terry. There was a place called McFadden Music there in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where Fort Bragg was. And I wanted to go to GIT, and these two brothers from Fayetteville had just went to GIT and had come back and were deciding what they were going to do. And one of them was teaching at McFadden Music. That guy was Jimmy Herring, who plays with Widespread Panic now. And he was Colonel Bruce Hampton's Aquarian Rescue Unit. You know what a great guitar player Jimmy is.
Absolutely.
But I took lessons from Jimmy when I was in the Army at Fort Bragg. So, and he had just come from Musicians Institute. So he shared with me a lot of the criteria and the things I would be trying to learn when I got there. And to this day, that's just one of the biggest blessings in my life, was to run into him.
Do you remember your first day at GIT at the school? Because I remember, how overwhelming and or comfortable did you feel? Or I would imagine both. I know I did at my first day at Berkeley. It was a lot. Did you just slide right in?
Well, I flew in from North Carolina, and it's interesting because the overwhelmingness, I think, started as the plane started to descend, because as the plane was moving into LAX, I realized that even though I'd been in an airplane many times in my life, I'd never landed in one.
I'd jumped out of them.
I'd never been in a plane I hadn't jumped out of. And so I thought, and I got really nervous. I don't know why, but it's like, oh my God, we're going to land this thing. How can it possibly land? And then, and I didn't know anybody. I hadn't, and I wasn't very good at making friends. I was from a town where, there's 200 people in the high school that I went to, the high school class that I graduated with. I was completely overwhelmed. And the first day going to GIT and seeing all these people from all over the world who, in my opinion, were so much better than I was. And I was even though I'd practiced and wanted this more than anything on earth, I felt woefully underprepared for what I was about to do. And then, and at the times that I went to GIT, Frank Gambale and Paul Gilbert and these people were the teachers.
Right.
You'd go to a class, and the sweep picking class is Frank Gambale and you and 20 guys. It was to this day like a dream come true to be able to sit there and watch people who are true masters at this instrument that you love so much and try to just sponge everything you can off of them. It was unbelievable to me.
I love that you just said that. You didn't say it was terrifying. You said it was a dream come true. And I get that, because I felt very similar when, because we both put ourselves through school. Nobody did it for us or was able to help us and our families. And so that number one, I think you walk in with an advantage when you're the only one who's wants you to be there, essentially.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were there to win. You were there to be a sponge, and take it all in. But what year was that? Which part of the 80s was that? That
would have been 1987. So kind of the tail end of the hair thing, when I was there, the hair bands would still come down on Sunset Boulevard and play a lot of the unknown bands, but the Kings were like Motley Crue and people like that, and they would show up, at this. They would show up at the Rainbow or somewhere like that if you were down there playing or hanging out. So it was still everything you had hoped it would be, but it was kind of past the point that those bands were getting signed a lot.
Yeah. And you played in rock bands, that was your thing before you went down, before you established yourself as a country artist or made a decision to focus on being a country artist. Is that how you describe it, or did it just happen organically?
I just wanted to play guitar. And when I was in LA, I was really trying to learn how to do the rock and roll thing, and I auditioned and played in a whole bunch of rock bands. They were all original bands, which was really cool, because there were so many great writers and players. My criteria, Terry, oddly enough, for the bands that I played in is I would play in every single band I could play in. The only thing I wanted was I wanted everyone in the band to be better than me.
Oh
I
yeah.
tried to I tried to always get in bands where the people I was playing with were a lot better than I was. And then when I got to Nashville, that was easy because everybody in Nashville was better than me. And and I just got to play with so many different kinds of musicians. And LA was LA was kind of segmented. You know, the jazz guys were in this group over here, and the rock guys were here, and never the two shall meet. You know, drummers weren't like that. They all shared everything. We're all friends, but guitar players, the rock guys didn't hang out with the jazz guys as much. And I think that's changed a lot now, but that's how it was then.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you, I'm so curious about you as a writer and also as a singer. Were you writing as a kid, and where did you get your vocal training, or is that completely God-given?
Well,
Because
I've always,
you can sing and
I've
you
all,
can write.
well, thank you for saying that, Terry. But I think I started writing songs immediately. I remember being in the orphanage and they would take us to Little Joe's Chapel, and I couldn't read the hymnal, but when the lady would play the piano, I would make my own words up to the songs. And then I think later in high school, my band, which was an original band even then, was more because I couldn't figure out the other songs.
Got it.
I wrote my own songs because I wasn't able to, I just had a phonograph, and back in those days, you'd slowed it down or try to pick it up. There was no internet to learn it off of.
Right.
And so, um, and when I moved to California, I wanted to play so bad that I would play in any kind of band that I
Mhm.
could play with. But I enjoyed, and then when you got to Nashville, those guys were dead serious about it, and they could play any style. I mean, Nashville has a lot of people there from Berkeley, like where you went, North Texas State College, which is a great music school as well. People would come there, and there was just all these people who were great at something. And I would, even when I watch bands that maybe aren't as accomplished or technical with their music, I still learn a lot from them. I can learn stuff from watching good bands or bad bands,
Mhm.
even if you're learning what not to do.
Right.
Right.
And so you're singing. Were you singing as a kid? Have you ever taken vocal lessons, or do you study along the way just to keep your instrument tuned? Yeah, so
I
that you
still,
can tour and there are physical aspects to singing as well as emotional aspects and storytelling aspects.
I agree. I started singing more as a default because singers were really flaky and they wouldn't show up and I just started singing more out so we could play. I didn't
Right.
consider myself a singer. I still don't actually. I think I'm I think I'm a pretty good communicator in that I can get my thoughts across
Yeah.
singing them, but my style is really almost conversational in a lot of respects in the way I approach it. And it's not like there are people who are born with great voices like, Pavarotti and Vince Gill and
Mhm.
uh, Trisha Yearwood and people like that. I've had to work, and my guitar playing is the same. It's not a natural gift for me. It's just something I really, really, really love. And so I'll put however much time I have, which is all of it, in
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to do it. My fiddle player, he's the exact opposite.
Mhm.
It's a God-given gift to
Right.
him.
Mhm.
He doesn't practice, and we have a section in our show where we do this like duel back and forth, and I usually start it because it wouldn't work if he started it because I wouldn't be able to play what he plays. But I'll play something, and I'll play something really. We'll usually pick like a couple minor chords and have them vamp, and then I'll do like a Lydian flat 7 run or something like that, something really kind of odd and technical, and he'll play it back note for note on the fiddle right away.
Right.
And when we first started doing that, I was saying to him, I said, do you know the Locrian mode? And he'll go, no, I just play, you play it and I play it back. And and same with singing. He
Uh-huh.
just opens his mouth and it comes out. His daughter is our other singer in the
Yeah.
band, the other harmony singer, and everything that comes from them is just a God-given talent. I think Terry, it might be a bigger blessing though to not have that gift,
You think?
because then you want it so bad you're chasing it your whole life, still trying to catch it and never feeling like you get it. And I don't ever want to be that guy. I
Yeah.
don't want to be the guy that says, "Oh, I got this figured out." It's like I think motorcycles and guitars are almost exactly the same. The day that you decide you know how to ride a motorcycle and you're good at it, you should hang your keys up.
Right.
because it's dangerous, and there's lots of distracted driving, and you never really master it.
Yeah.
And I don't you feel that way about the guitar, kind of like it's always a work in
Absolutely.
progress.
Absolutely. It's a never ending uh journey, but that's part of the joy of it too. And yeah, I think that's probably I think one of the reasons you and I connected immediately when we first met was because I just I'm very like-minded in the way we approach it. And I I have somewhat of a natural gift, but it's mostly sweat equity, and passion and hunger and curiosity and just wanting to get better. That drives me. And so I absolutely am with you on that. And in some ways, it does give us well, we'll never know. We are who we are.
Right.
We were dealt the cards that we were dealt when we were kids, and we got what we got. But it's what we do with what we were given or what we've created. I think that makes us who we are.
Tony Brown was talking to me once. He produced my albums in Nashville, and he's a friend.
Yeah.
And he said to me, he said once we were talking about this guy who I thought was one of the most talented people ever, and he's not really a household name. And Tony said, I know lots of incredibly talented people who are unsuccessful, and I know lots of marginally talented people who are incredibly successful. He thinks talent is just one small part of it,
Wow,
and all these other factors come into play.
there's something comforting in hearing that, especially from somebody as seasoned as Tony. Brown.
Right.
There's another thing that Tony Brown said in your movie, and again, Tony's a national producer, record executive, and one of your mentors. Uh, but I haven't met Tony, but I've always been a fan of his work and his work ethic and the people the music that he's been involved in making in Nashville. But he says in the movie it's timing. Everything is timing. And he also spoke about your stage presence, charisma, and confidence, which I thought was really sweet of him to do. But I really get the feeling from watching the movie that you and Tony, he knows who you are. Like he sees you for who you are,
Mm.
and he respects and appreciates that. So, but when he talked about stage presence, charisma, and confidence, it's similar to what you're saying, like Tony saying, well, there's talent is not the main factor in success. Presence, charisma, and confidence. I wanted to ask you about confidence. Where do you get your confidence from? Is that from being in the military? Is that from growing up in an orphanage? Or how would you describe confidence for you?
That's a great question, Terry. And I think it pops into my head 3 or 4 times that people have said something to me. And maybe it's because I'm not a really complicated person. I'm kind of a, I'm kind of a simple person. Like, people say, what do you do for fun? I do for fun exactly what I do for work. I do
Yeah.
the same things. But I remember when I graduated from uh, the training in the Army, when you go through the line there and you get your wings, they slam the wings on your chest. And the drill sergeant, the tack sergeant guy said to me, his name was Sergeant Cowan, and he said, son, if you can do this, you can do anything. And then he slammed those wings into my chest. And I just believed him when he said that. And it's interesting because when I auditioned, the only time I ever auditioned for a record label ever in my life was when I played guitar personally for Doug Morris,
Mhm.
Doug, who was the head of Universal Records. I was playing in a bar, and someone got me an appointment to New York, and I went to New York, and they said, now tomorrow morning you're going to play 4 songs for Doug Morris. And when Doug walked in, he came in with Tommy Mottola, Avery and Monty Lipman, uh, I mean, all the guys from Motown Records, all the guys for Universal, and when they came in, they just sat down, and there was a stage in Monty's office. That's where I was on,
Mhm.
and I sang. And about halfway through my second song, this other song came blaring from the room out on the other side. They were playing like I think it was Ludacris. They were playing like a Ludacris song really loud.
Yeah.
And someone went out and got them to turn it off. But I didn't stop. I just kept going because
Yeah.
I've been playing in bars and Piggly Wiggly grand openings forever. I wasn't going to stop. I finally
Right.
had them.
Just like the blender, so making margaritas at the other end of the day. You don't stop.
Exactly. I don't know, pizza, table 19, your pizza's ready. I'm fine with that. And so when I finished, Doug said to me, he said, "Do you ever get nervous when you sing?" And I said, "Well, sometimes I do." He said, "Well, you just sang in front of the most powerful people in the music business ever. You should
Mhm.
never be nervous again."
Ah,
And I took that to heart, exactly
right.
like I did when the guy said, "Well, if you can do this, you can do anything."
Right.
So, I just think I've practiced all these decades and all these years. I'm not going to get any better in the next 5 minutes, and worrying about it isn't going to make it any different. So I'm going to
Right.
go up there and do whatever it is I do. And if people like it, they do. And if they do, they'll be in my tribe. So I'm gonna go give it my best. I don't let those things worry about me too
Right.
much.
Well, thanks for answering that question. I didn't have any expectation of what the answer would be, but that's not what I expected. Because there's
No,
because there's really a beauty to the simplicity in the way you were able to receive information when it's good information. If you can do this, you can do anything. Bam. It's like,
yeah,
okay, I got it. I'm going to do that. That's beautiful, Rocky. That's great.
yeah.
I mean, it's
Thank you,
something
man.
clearly you know it somewhere in yourself, but to be able just to receive it like that and then incorporate that is why not? I mean, people go based, their whole lives based on these conceptions or misconceptions about what life is and what's important and what isn't, or who they are or who they aren't. Why not decide good things?
Right.
And unlimited things and then with the ability to be able to back it up by working hard for it
Right.
and bringing
Another,
gratitude and just enjoying it, the journey of it.
I was getting ready to do a showcase once. This is before I was able to go to a record company. We were doing a showcase in Nashville, and my friend Mark Prentice had helped me put it together,
Mhm.
who's in the movie as well. And he's one of my musical mentors. He's hands down the best musician I've ever met in my whole life. And he was playing bass for me that night, with me that night.
Mhm.
And we were up in the dressing room, and we had people from all over the country that had come. And we invited all these record labels, but none of them came. But that's another story. But we had all these people, and I was nervous. I was sitting up there, and I was literally nervous. And he said, "Do you believe in God?" That's what the first thing he said. And I said, "Well, yeah, I think there's a God." He said, "Do you think God gives you gifts?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, what about your children? Do you ever give your children a gift?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Why'd you give it to them?" I said, "What?" And he said, "Why would you give your child a gift?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "You give it to them because you think they might enjoy it."
Hmm.
And I said, "Yeah." He said, "So why be nervous? You're going to get to play with some great musicians today, and there's a room full of people that love you.
Mhm.
Just enjoy it." And it washed over me that day, and I thought, and that was part of those four things I was telling you about. It just washed over me, and I thought, yeah, this is a chance to play my songs for people and see if they like it, and play with people I love. I should enjoy every second of it, every sandwich.
Mhm.
I remember that Randy Newman on a David Letterman. David asked him, if you had advice for people in the world, what would it be? And he said, enjoy every sandwich.
Ah, wow. Well, there's a lyricist for you too.
You got it, man.
But he knows, he knows, and he's a family guy too.
Yeah.
So uh, let's talk about. I want to make sure let's talk about the tribute to the troops, and then we'll really get into the movie. In 2004, you co-founded Tribute to the Troops. I know motorcycles are one of your deep loves as well as music, which you've mentioned. And um, by the way, you must have read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance at one point in your
Of
life, right?
course.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking of that when you were telling your stories. To our listeners, if you haven't, go treat yourself to some literature and go get that book. It's great. Even if you're not a musician or a motorcycle
Right.
rider, it's about life. Um, But why don't you explain? Because you'll explain better than me just reading off the paper. What what is Tribute to the Troops all about for you? Why did you create it, and what 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 does it mean to you? Which is everything, I know.
Well, I had written this song called Home when I was in the Army, and I'd written it for one of our brothers in our unit that had passed away. And whenever I was gotten out of the Army, whenever I was playing at a nightclub or whatever, I would always sing that song every night and dedicate it to the veterans that were in the room. But mostly I sang it to remind me that my friend would never get to sing again. He'd never be there again. I just wanted to keep it close to me. And when we started having the Iraq war and the Afghanistan and all that stuff was going on, there were all these, I lived in Minnesota, and there were all these soldiers that were losing their lives. And a friend of mine, John Murray, who runs the video department at Brown University there, he's just a buddy. He'd come out and watch me play every night. He had his kids do a class project with that song Home. I gave him a recording of it, and he made a DVD, which was really like a PowerPoint presentation. During the verse, it showed soldiers doing soldier things. And then in the chorus, it would say fly home. And then it would show the picture of all the Minnesota soldiers that had passed away. You just have their picture and have their date of birth and the date that they passed. And I thought, I think his mother would love to see this. These boys' mothers and fathers would like to see this video. That's where the idea came from. And so we put together, my friend Greg Schmitt and I, the first year we visited 3 families, and we would drive up to their house or ride up to their house where the boy or the girl grew up, where they learned to play baseball or football or learned to shovel snow in Minnesota. We'd stand in their yard and tell their parents, we noticed. That's really all we're doing, is saying we noticed. We know that every single day is Memorial Day at your house. And we want you to know that somebody cares about this. It's not pro-war, it's not anti-war, it's none of those things. It was very anti-war, actually, but it's not pro-war. It's pro just recognizing those people. I joined the Army because there was no other choice. For me, it was work at the furniture store, furniture factory, which is a good place to work in North Carolina. It's fine. Or go in the Army. Those are my choices. Mm-hmm. And then I got deployed. Luckily, I lived and I came home. This is a tribute to those who did not. Mm-hmm. We, over the last 20 some years, we visited over 500 families. We've sent 123 children to college whose parents had been killed in the war. And I tell you, Terry, if that's all I ever did in my life, that's way more than I ever thought I'd be able to do. And I'm super proud of it and honored to be a part of Tribute to the Troops.
I learned through your foundation that 22 veterans a day lose their life by their own hand, which is almost one every hour of each day. That's quite a statistic.
That's one of the things as our organization grew, we started focusing on the people who don't get the big parades and don't get the recognition that all of them deserve. And post-traumatic stress is a real thing. Mm-hmm. It's something that when these boys come back and these girls come back, that they have to live through. In the Vietnam days and World War II, they'd call it shell shock, or they would just say, oh, Bobby, he's a drunk or whatever. He's a Vietnam drunk or whatever. But they were suffering and they were struggling. And sometimes they lose their battle with post-traumatic stress and they pass away, sometimes even by their own hand. And we seek those people out as well to tell them that empty place at the table is exactly the same to them as it is for every other Gold Star mother. It feels the same.
It's such important work that you are a part of. Where can people, if they want to be involved in your organization or any type of an organization like that, where would you send them?
Well, they could go to tributetothetroops.org, or you can go to just Google me, Rockie Lynne, and go to my website, and you can click on there's a button there somewhere, and we'll send you information about when we're having a tribute event that's in your area. We won't inundate you with a bunch of emails, but like if you lived in Illinois, they would send you an email when the Illinois tribute ride's going to happen, so you would know. And all the events are free, and we would love for people to come. And now we don't just take motorcycles; we have cars and people and school buses with or church buses with people on them that all just show up to this person's house. And almost always it's 10 or 12 years after it's happened, because when something horrible like that happens, they get a lot of attention at first, but then it doesn't take long for the news cycle to move on, and for this mom and dad or this wife and children to be sitting in a house thinking nobody remembers,
Right.
nobody cares, and it's our responsibility to tell them that somebody does.
Yeah, that's one of the, I think one of the most difficult phases of grief is when everybody goes back to what they were doing. You know, the sun comes up, kids are going to school, the birds are singing, life continues to go on, but yours has stopped completely. It will never
Right.
be the same.
If you ever come with me to some of those houses, Terry, sometimes a lot of time, the parents or the wives would invite me in to see their son or daughter's room.
Mhm.
And that room would be the same as it was before they left for the Army. They haven't moved anything. It's all exactly like it was, because they can't bring themselves to take it down, because it's like saying he's not there anymore.
Right.
You know?
Mhm.
And it's like a cloud of just and of hurt that they live in their whole lives. And if we're able to bring some kind of light to that, a little bit of love, just say, even though we can't know exactly how you feel, we can't know how those people feel because we hadn't gone through that. Thank God we haven't. But
Mhm.
we can say we can be here for you,
Right.
and remember your loved one.
Mhm. Yeah. I'd I'd be honored to do that with you sometime. Let's make that happen.
Absolutely, brother.
Let's talk about your new album, Love, and also your new documentary, Where I Belong, which is on PBS and Amazon Prime, which means it's going to be streaming so people can see it
Mm-hmm.
anytime. Um, what do you want to say about that experience? I mean, I know when you said yes to it, a lot more happened than you could have ever dreamt, personally,
Well,
not just career-wise.
you know, I wasn't against it, I guess, but I was not for it. When I was hosting this show on A&E, I did a couple episodes of it called Operation Build,
Mhm.
where they were retrofitting these veterans' homes, people who had lost like their legs, and making it so they could get into the bathroom or get in and out of their door. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to do, and people from Tribute to the Troops would all volunteer, and we'd do the work. We'd build the porch or whatever, and and those people thought they might want me to host this other show, but I wasn't well known enough. It was their idea, JC Summerford's idea. So let's do a documentary about you. And I thought, well, why would you do that? Who would want to watch it? And maybe it'd be awful. And that was my biggest fear, is that it was going to suck. That was
Right.
going to, oh my God, it's going to be bad. But then as we got into it, and then we got 23andMe involved, that was where things really started to change, that company, because they sought out my well, first we found my sister. I have a biological sister, and it's interesting how she ended up on 23andMe to begin with, because as her mother was on her deathbed, her mother was in the final stages of her life.
Mhm.
She said, Melinda, you should look around, because there's probably some more siblings out there. She told her on her deathbed that she thinks her husband might have some other children out there somewhere. And my biggest fear, Terry, was that I didn't want to upset somebody's apple cart.
Of course.
I didn't want to show up and say this family, because the family, speaking of my dad's family, he had 3 daughters and a son and a wife that he had for 54 years. And I didn't want to all of a sudden show up and be like someone who ruins his family's life and what their thoughts of this person was.
Right.
But her mother told her as she was passing, there may be other siblings. And so they did the opposite of like, I wanted to make sure it was very calm, and I didn't hurt anybody's feelings. And they just opened up their doors and their lives, and just wrapped their arms around me.
Hmm.
And so we went from having, just our family at Christmas to this whole extended long group of people. And then when I wrote my father's guitar for the album, let me grab my guitar.
Yeah.
I used that line that he used. He called himself a rounder all his life. That's what it says. But the verse is, he called himself a rounder all his life. He made a few mistakes, but saw the light. And as the story goes, and a few of you may know, I'm one of his mistakes he made right.
And then you go on to say he called himself a rounder all his life. He made a few mistakes, but
saw the light.
Yeah.
He made a few mistakes, but saw the light. And as the story goes, a few of you may know, I'm one of his mistakes that he made right.
Beautiful.
And it was just a beautiful man. I was so grateful to get to meet him. And then, I was so different than my adopted parents. My adopted parents, we have almost nothing in common as far as like what we like and the things that we're drawn to. But when I met my father, he'd been a guitar player his whole life in a country band. He was a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne, and he rode a motorcycle his whole life. And he told me, we got so close, Terry, before he passed away. I knew him for about 3 years. And he had pictures of me playing on the Grand Ole Opry, sitting by his bed. He would have his wife play he called them my movies, but he meant, the videos from Universal, and those he would play those songs. And he told me before he passed, he took my hand and he said, you did everything that I wanted to do. It's almost like he was living his life vicariously through me. I mean, he was unbelievably proud of me, and I'd never really had that. I mean, my dad is the dad that I have is very cool, but he's not a man of a lot of words or compliments or that kind of thing. And so when my biological father would look at me and say, I love you and I'm proud of what you're doing, I'd never really heard that before. And I fooled myself into thinking I didn't want that or I didn't need that, but I sure felt good,
Yeah, absolutely. I do know. And you get used to not expecting it or looking for it. But when it does show up in whatever ways it does show up, man, that's what an overwhelming, beautiful feeling that can be.
Absolutely.
To get that kind of, it's not praise, it's love. It's just, there's very pure. Very pure.
Acceptance, maybe,
Acceptance, yeah.
Yeah, feeling like you're a part of something. It's like, I guess that's what all that rambling to say, that it feels like with our family, like we're from somewhere. And these are our people, and here we are, and I'm positive that a lot of people might take that for granted, but people that come from the places like we've come from, we don't take it for granted. It means a lot. It means a lot to be from somewhere.
Did your birth parents and your adoptive parents get to meet in person or speak on the phone or anything? Or was that like a little bit over the...
Well, my mom, when you see the movie, and we'll leave that story, I guess, separate, because it's even more crazy story.
Yeah,
but she died. She died when I was 27 years old, and then my adopted dad, he's still alive. He's 91. He doesn't travel very much, and then my biological father died during COVID, and I met him right before COVID, so they never got to meet, even though my adopted dad does go to events where my sisters and brothers are, and you should see them, man. You should see them, Terry. They just wrap their arms around him and love on him, and he's not a huggy kissy kind of guy, and you can just see him thinking, what's going on? But I know that he's proud of it, and he's happy that I found my father, and he's happy that I found my people, and it just makes your circle bigger and a little stronger, so that it's all positive.
Right. It doesn't take away from anything. It only enhances, right? For you and for your family, which is...
Absolutely. The more people that love you, the better.
Right. Check, please. Right. There, you just said it. The more people that love you, the better. Yeah, you're right. I so agree with you. There's a beautiful song that you wrote about your biological mom, Shirley Ann, called Love Goes On. And can I share the lyrics, or would you? There's just...
No, please go ahead.
Forgiving you. I just wrote these down because they really, the songs. I'm a fan of your songwriting and your
Gosh,
storytelling. There because there. You just get to the truth. You just get to the heart of the truth with your lyrics. So love goes on. Forgiving you is the one thing I thought I might never do. When I think of you, I've left all that anger behind. Your memory's gotten sweeter with time. And I realize though you're gone, love goes on. Boy, like I could really
I
feel
it's
everything
so
you felt
odd
about your mom. Yeah.
to write a song about somebody you've never met.
Right.
I was
Right.
writing a song about my mom, and the second verse, goes, forgiving me, ashamed of my reflection, weeping back at me. Oh, how I long to be forgiven for the things I have done. Then it goes, I wish you could see the man I've become, true and strong. Oh, I was wrong. Love goes on. But then the bridge, it goes, I wish I could meet you for the first time today. Wow. That's a crazy thing to think about, right?
Yeah.
Wish I could meet you for the first time today and know what I know now.
Mm.
I could be the man you wanted me to be. But it's so interesting because when you guys see the movie, you'll know that wasn't really what happened. That I always thought she had abandoned me.
Yeah.
And that was the whole thing about forgiving you. But in reality, forgiving her was the best thing I could ever do. And then when I found out it had really nothing to do with her, it was, I was holding all this inside. It was just a very odd thing when I would think about my mother, because it was a complicated relationship with somebody that I've never met. I don't even know.
Right. Was it one of the hardest songs that you've written, or did it write itself from this experience of again, I don't want to give the movie away, but about really finding out some of the truth about your birth mother and father?
No, I think the hardest song for me to write was a song that I wrote with Richard Lee called Where Songs Come From.
Mm-hmm.
Because prior to this conversation would have never been able to happen, Terry, because for the first third of my life, I basically either avoided the questions about where I was from, or I would lie about it. I didn't want anybody to know. I didn't want anybody to feel sorry for me and say, oh, the poor kid from the orphanage, or the guy with the flat head, or because they didn't turn me over. It sounds like a bad joke, but like the reason I was 5 years old and not adopted is they forgot to turn me over in the orphanage, and the back of my head's flat. That's why I have a lot of hair. But anyway, I thought I always never told anybody about that. And Susan, who was the publicist, she's my wife now, but she was the publicist at Universal Records. It was her job to tell my story. And no don't mean anything to her. So she would say, well, let's talk about your childhood. And I said, well, I got a guitar. And then I was kind of whitewashing the whole thing.
Sure.
And then finally she said, just tell me. And I said, I'll tell you one time, and that's it. And I told her way more than anybody knows. Because it was tough, orphanages, foster homes, abuse. I just told her the whole thing. And then I got adopted when I was 5, and all this great things happened. And so she said, okay. And then the next day she calls me to her office. Now we're just friends at this point. And in her office was Richard Lee, who we talked about earlier. Richard wrote, Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue? He wrote a whole bunch of stuff. He's in the Songwriter Hall of Fame. And she said, I told one person. And I thought, oh my gosh, I told her. The next day she's already told somebody. But she told Richard Lee, and Richard Lee's story was the same as mine. And she knew this. Richard grew up in Louisiana. He was orphaned as an infant. And then Richard Lee was adopted by a family from Minnesota. And here's the really weird, like ancient alien God part of this thing. My address when I got my record deal was 1023 Crooked Lake Boulevard in Anoka County, Minnesota. His parents that raised him was at 1025 Crooked Lake Boulevard. I've been living beside them and mowing their yard for a decade. And we were able to, Richard and I, we wrote this song about exactly what the truth was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they say the snow came early that winter that year. A little foundling child on the sister's stairs. But don't pity me, I'm the lucky one. Oh, can't you see? That's where songs come from. Well, that's where songs come from. That's where steel is forged. For it's in the fire that the blade is born. I'm a soul survivor. I'm a fatherless son. But that's okay. That's where songs come from. And we wrote that day. And I decided that I'm proud of my children. I'm proud of what we've done. I'm going to be proud of who I am and proud of where I'm from because I can't change it.
Right.
And that's why the movie was even ever able to be made. Or now I can sit with you and talk with you because I'm not trying to hide any of it. It's just, and if anything, maybe people can be helped by it and realize that regardless of the circumstance you get born into or end up in, perseverance and hope will eventually find your way to where you're supposed to be.
Right. So you don't feel anymore that you need to be ashamed of it or to hide from it.
Exactly. It's opposite. I'm proud of it. I'm proud that, because a lot of those kids from the orphanage, I haven't been able to find. I tried looking up some of the one boy, especially that I spent some time at a really super abusive foster parent's house for a while, and I can't find him. And who knows what may have happened to him, right?
Right. Because we're talking about physical and mental abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, all kinds of abuse.
All the bad things.
Right. That many of which you survived and thrived.
We're sitting here right through it right now,
aren't we? Yeah.
Happy to be here with you, brother.
Yeah. Likewise. Very happy. I want to talk about inspiration before we get to our closing questions. Sometimes inspiration comes from unexpected places. I'm wondering, besides the obvious, what inspires you? Where do you find your inspiration and what inspires you in life?
My songs are mostly story songs. I know that country music now is where a lot of the subject matter is different than what I write about. But my songs are story songs, and they're usually things that are, if I didn't experience it myself, I've known someone that did. So it's kind of first person. So I'm kind of inspired. I try to take even just like normal things because I think things can be inspiring. A beautiful sunny day can be inspiring if you look at it properly, And so, but I'm really inspired by all the people I see that have overcome incredible obstacles to get where they are. It just floors me when I hear those stories. And I meet people. I'm working with a girl now, doing a record for her who her family life was 10,000 times worse than mine.
Mm-hmm.
And she was born with a cleft lip. Do you know what that is?
I do.
And
Yeah.
had to have like 100 surgeries. And she didn't speak till she was 7. And then when she started to sing at 15, when she opened her mouth and started singing, I'll describe her voice the way I think it sounds. And you tell me if this makes sense to Terry, who's a great guitar player. I bet he will. She sounds like a 1968 Fender Deluxe that's been on for about 5 hours and turned up to 7 when she opens her mouth. That's what it counts out. Like, it's naturally like this
Absolutely.
broken up, really cool tube amplifier.
Yeah.
And I get just blown away by that kind of stuff, that people that see the light at the end of the tunnel, even when there's no light, but know there's something there.
Mm-hmm. You produce and mentor a lot of young independent artists. And I love doing the same. I think it's great that you do that. We're actually speaking to you from your studio,
Yes, sir.
where you co-write, you write, you produce, you do you help them find placement for their songs, or guide them as well with the life of an independent artist? Because as many of us, we've been signed and we've been independent.
Mhm. I do. We try to help every way that we can, but I think the biggest thing that I can help with a lot of these young folks I'm working with is that we've been on the road long enough,
Yeah,
you and I,
yeah.
to hit a whole bunch of potholes and see where they are. And if
Mhm,
we can help them avoid some of the obvious potholes that they're headed toward, then it's kind of our responsibility to do so, right?
mhm.
Because, well, hey, maybe if because we're all gonna get wherever we're gonna get or do whatever we're gonna do. But if we can help someone get over that initial curve a little easier, then I think that makes me feel good, man. When someone comes in here and I can get a vocal on them or help them write a song about something that they've gone through, if the only people that ever hear it are me and that person, that's fine with me.
Right.
Because we did exactly what we set out to do, which is tell this story and do it from the most brutally honest and forthright way that we can.
Mhm.
And so it's not about audiences to me. I would love it if me and you were touring playing the stadiums. I'd love it. But if we play less than that, I'm cool with that too, man.
Yeah, I'm with you, brother. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to squeeze in one extra question just because it's on my mind, and then I'll hit our closing questions. What do you think has changed the most during your career, and what has remained the same?
I think what's changed the most is the way we can reach people.
Mm.
This medium right here. There up and back when I started trying to get in rock bands when I lived in LA, the first audition was a beauty contest. The first audition was we're looking for guys that are between 5'8" and 5'11". I got a lot of didn't get a lot of auditions because I was 6'3", 200 pounds. It's kind of a big guy.
Mhm.
Now anybody can put music out and put it on the web or be, if you're lucky enough to be on a podcast or something with somebody like you. All those doors were closed for decades and decades, and we were fed great music because there were great artists, but nowhere near the amount of great artists that are out there.
Mhm.
And now there's all these great people that have always been there, and it doesn't matter what they look like or what their socioeconomic background is or their race or their religion. You can reach the world. And I think that is probably what's changed the most. And I think what's not changed is that even though, I mean, there was when drum machines first came out, drummers were concerned in the bar gigs that they were going to lose their place
Right.
because drum machines were going to take it over. And now there's AI and there's companies like Splice that you can just take and drag into a different DAW, and it'll change the key and the tempo and make all your parts work together. Even if you don't even know what music is, you can just drag stuff in there. A monkey could do it.
Right.
Well, what doesn't change is communication. A person with a guitar or a drum set that's given you their soul, you can feel it, especially when it's live. And that honesty is what I think cuts through all the BS in the world and touches people's hearts. And if one person can, I just sang for the third largest Vietnam Veterans Association in in the United States last night down in Orlando, Florida. We were down there playing at this place where they are, and I knew they didn't have a PA and they were veterans. They didn't have a budget. So I took you know what a Pelican case is, right?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
took a Pelican case with two little battery powered speakers, Bose speakers about this big, a little mixer and I took the whole PA,
Just
set it up
packed it up.
myself
Right.
and played for 400 people. And it was beautiful because it was all these brothers in arms kind of hugging each other, and it wasn't a good PA, it wasn't anything, it was just was what it was, but it was honest and it was real, and I don't think that ever changes.
Mhm. Yeah. And I'm glad it never will change. That it's
It won't.
yeah.
There's always a place for the court gesture, for the for the musician.
Well, let's get to my three closing questions that I ask all of my guests. And
Ooh.
the first of them is, since this show is called Making It, What does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally?
Making it to me has always meant being able to continue to do it. And I think that's a really big blessing of growing up without a lot of means or without money or without anything. Because to me, the first time that I was able to play and sing, and if I can get myself to the next place and still do that, it's not about fame or fortune or notoriety even. I love to play guitar and I love to share my stories with people. And this is making it. Making a friend who's as talented and as well known and renowned as you are and being able to be on your show, that is as important to me as anything I've ever done. And I think that sometimes people paint themselves into corners and say, if I can't be Tim McGraw, I wouldn't be successful. And that's setting yourself up for failure because there's so many other avenues. And I tell these kids this all the time. Well, maybe you can't be Nelly, but you could be an engineer and record people, or you could learn how to play guitar and play guitar for Nelly. Those are all signs of success.
Mhm.
Being able to do something for a living that I would gladly have done for free my whole life, to me, is success.
Mhm. Can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
I think I was fortunate enough to play when I was in high school in a band full of alcoholics. Uh, I was 14 years old, 15 years old, and we'd play the Silver Spur in Love Valley or whatever night honky tonk we're playing.
Mhm.
And I'd be driving the van home at 14 because all the guys in the band were just hammered in the back.
Mhm.
And that taught me to stay away from heavy use of drugs or alcohol, uh, just to not let that interfere with what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And I think that trying to keep your head about you and stay clean is super important when you're trying to climb the biggest mountain and you don't have maybe all the tools that other people do. I think the second thing that I think of as a good tip would be to play your own music. Not to play there. Every single VFW and every bar in the country has some 50-year-old guy that thinks, "Hey, I wonder what would have happened if I'd have tried it. Wonder what would have happened." Instead, he's playing Proud Mary for the 15,000th time, you know? And there's nothing wrong with Proud Mary. I'm not knocking any of those songs. I'm just saying I think you have to play your own music and find your own tribe. And then the third thing I would say is there's one thing that will guarantee that you fail, and you have to avoid that at all costs. That you can never, ever, ever, no matter what, quit.
Mm.
Don't quit. Don't sell yourself short, and don't leave the game 2 minutes before the miracle, because your miracle's coming, and you just stick with it and find your tribe.
Great tips. Thank you for
Oh,
sharing
thank you.
those. My final
Yes, sir.
question for you, and then I'll give you closing thoughts, is at this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true and everything that you've experienced, what would you tell your younger self?
I wish that I could tell my younger self. I wish I could tell the kid that moved out to LA, and I was just so floored. I mean, to go from the small town like this to, I mean, just seeing, you remember BAM magazine or
Yeah.
all the bands, I was just overwhelmed with the sheer numbers of people there were in the world I didn't know. And what I wish I had been better at, and that I wish that I try to be better at now, is networking,
Mm.
is meeting people, introducing myself. There were many, many times I wasn't a party person, and I would go in somewhere and I would play a gig and then I would leave. I wish I would have hung around more.
Mhm.
I wish I would have introduced myself to more people. I wish I would have tried to build relationships with people who were doing more what I wanted, instead of being so shy and probably doubting my own abilities a great deal and thinking I'm not good enough to hang out with that guy. I'll never forget. I probably went to 100 classes that Paul Gilbert taught, and I'm the biggest Paul Gilbert fan in the world. And I was learning Racer X songs note for note and doing all this stuff, but I never spoke to him because I was nervous. I was too
Wow, I'm
nervous to
surprised.
go up. I am too.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I mean, I'm talking now and I can't shut up ever. But if I saw him now, I'd hug his neck and kiss him on the cheek and say, "Look,
Right.
man, I wanted to talk to you for years."
Yeah.
But he was just like this this thing that I wanted to be. He still is. I
Yeah.
wanted to be able to alternate pick like that. You know, same with Frank Gambale, the sweep picking thing, and I wanted to be able to do that. And I wish I would have tried to make myself more available and open
Mhm.
and not nervous about it. I think I wish I'd have done that.
Well, you're doing it now. That's for
I'm
sure.
doing it now. I'm gonna have lunch one day soon with Terry. I guarantee it.
I can't wait. I really look forward to that. And I truly mean that. And wherever we can make that happen, let's do that. And we'll play some music together too to sweeten the deal.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Um, the new movie is called Where I Belong on PBS and Amazon Prime. The new album is called Love. And where is Love out yet?
Love comes out on the 26th, which is the day the movie's officially released.
Perfect.
On the same day. Yeah.
So everybody go buy it, stream it, share it, subscribe to Rockie's Spotify page and to mine as well. By the way, that's the way streaming royalties actually get paid, is by subscriptions. It doesn't cost you anything. So if you want to support Rockie and any artist that you love, that's a simple click of a button. And go check out the movie. It's really been a joy to speak with you, and I look forward to our continued conversations.
Terry, thank you for what you do for the music community and for the country in general. You're a national treasure, brother. Well, if a person with your pedigree and your talent to reach out and
Mm.
help people like me and all the people that you're helping in the world, I appreciate the time, and I'm honored to be on your show. Thank all your listeners for listening, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. I'm very touched by that. I really appreciate that. I want to thank all of our listeners and followers as well. Thanks for joining Rockie and I today. We both appreciate you, and I want to let everybody know, just remind you to stay safe and stay inspired, and we'll see y'all next week. Thank you, Rockie.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Woolman.